Hello, my YouTube family. I'm the Crime Whisperer, here to guide you through today's story. But before we start, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable and relax. The first time the car passed me, I barely noticed it. The second time, a twinge of unease crept in. By the fifth time, my heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear my own ragged breathing. There I was, stranded in my broken-down sedan on a pitch-black stretch of highway, and I realized with growing horror that I wasn't just stuck, I was being hunted. My name's Alex. Until that night, I never really thought about how vulnerable we all are out there on the open road. I was driving back from a business conference in Phoenix, taking the long way home to Los Angeles to enjoy some solitude after days of networking and forced small talk. It was just past midnight, and I was the only car on a lonely stretch of Highway 60, cutting through the Arizona desert. The sky was a tapestry of stars, untouched by city lights. A full moon bathed the desert in an ethereal glow. The radio was playing an old Eagles song. I was tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, feeling more relaxed than I had in months. Then, my car started to sputter. At first, I thought I hit a rough patch of road, but then the engine coughed. Dashboard lights flashed, and I felt the power fade. I managed to pull over onto the shoulder before the engine died completely. The sudden silence was almost deafening after the noise of the engine and radio. No, I muttered, turning the key again and again. Nothing, no click. I pulled out my phone, no signal. Of course, for a moment, I just sat there, trying to figure out what to do. I had some water and snacks, but no flashlight or flares. The nearest town was about 30 miles ahead, but walking in this darkness felt like a terrible idea. My best hope was waiting for another car to pass by. Maybe they'd stop to help. Then headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Relief washed over me. I turned on my hazard lights and stepped out, waving my arms to get their attention. But the car didn't slow down. It sped past, kicking up a cloud of dust that made me cough as it disappeared into the night. I caught a glimpse, a dark sedan, its taillights fading into the darkness. Thanks for nothing, I muttered, getting back inside. I tried the engine. Again, more out of hope than expectation. Still nothing. As I leaned back in my seat, trying to figure out my next move, I saw headlights again. At first, I thought it was another car, but as it got closer, I realized with a start it was the same dark sedan. It was coming back. My heart leaped. Maybe they'd realized I was in trouble and were turning around to help. But once again, the car sped past without slowing, though this time, I could have sworn it slowed just a little as it passed. A cold unease crept over me. Twice could be coincidence, but it felt off. I locked my doors, suddenly very aware of how exposed I was. The desert, which had seemed so beautiful earlier, now felt vast and threatening. Every shadow looked like it could be hiding something or someone. 10 minutes passed. 15, I started to think. I'd overreacted. Then I saw those headlights again, the same car, coming back for a third time. This time, there was no doubt it slowed considerably as it approached. I could make out the silhouette of a lone driver, but before I could get a good look, it sped up and disappeared into the night. My palms were sweating, my heart racing. This wasn't normal. No one drives back and forth on an empty highway at midnight, unless they're looking for something or someone. I tried my phone again. Still no signal. I thought about flagging down the next car, but stepping out suddenly felt terrifying. What if it was the sedan again? What if this time it stopped? The minutes crawled by, each one feeling like an hour. I jumped at every sound, the creak of the cooling engine, the whisper of wind across the desert, and then I saw the headlights again. For the fourth time, the sedan approached, this time. It slowed to a crawl as it passed. I shrank down in my seat, trying to make myself as small as possible. Through the glare of the headlights, I saw the driver turn their head and look right at me. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. This person, whoever they were, had singled me out. They were toying with me, like a cat playing with a mouse before going in for the kill as soon as the car passed. I made a decision. I had to get out of here, even if it meant walking. It had to be safer than sitting there waiting for whatever was coming next. I grabbed my phone and a bottle of water, took a deep breath, and opened my car door. The desert night was cool on my skin. The silence was absolute. I started walking, keeping to the shoulder of the road, my eyes darting from the path ahead to the road behind me. I had made it maybe half a mile when I saw the headlights again. My stomach dropped. It was coming back. Faster this time. I looked frantically for somewhere to hide, but there was nothing. Just flat desert stretching out on either side. In a panic, I threw myself down in a shallow ditch, pressing my body against the earth. I held my breath as the sedan pulled up next to me. The engine idled for a moment, then cut off. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps came closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling. This was it. Whatever sick game this person had been playing, it was about to end. "Hey, are you okay down there?" a voice said. Female. Concerned, not at all what I expected. I opened my eyes to see a middle-aged woman, a flashlight in her hand. What?" I stammered, too shocked to speak. "I saw your car back there," she said, offering me a hand. With highway patrol. We got a call about a broken-down vehicle, but it took me a while to find you. Are you hurt?" She helped me up, and I saw her car for the first time. It wasn't a dark sedan at all. It was a highway patrol SUV. In my panic, I'd mistaken the light bar on top for an ordinary car roof. "But you kept driving past," I said, still trying to process it. She nodded. "I was searching for you. Your car was empty, so I knew you must have started walking. I did a few passes to try and spot you." Relief washed over me so intensely. My knees went weak. I found myself laughing, bordering on hysteria. The officer, Sarah, according to her name tag, was incredibly kind. She drove me back to my car, called a tow truck, and stayed with me until it arrived. As we sat in her warm SUV, she explained that this stretch of highway was notorious for breaking down and losing cell signals. She'd seen plenty of panicked drivers over the years. "The desert at night can play tricks on your mind," she said gently. "Isolation, darkness, unfamiliar surroundings, it's the perfect recipe for fear." Watching my car being loaded onto the tow truck, I felt a mix of embarrassment and lingering unease. Sarah was right, I'd let my imagination run wild, but that night, I learned how quickly fear can take hold on an empty road. Imagination running wild had turned an act of kindness into a nightmare scenario. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't shake the memory of that fear, the absolute certainty that I was in danger. It's been months since that night, yet I still think about it often. I've driven that stretch of highways several times since then, always in daylight, always with a full tank of gas and a fully charged phone, and each time, I silently thank Sarah, the highway patrol officer who unknowingly saved me from my own fears. But sometimes, on dark nights, when I'm driving alone, I still check my rearview mirror a little more often than necessary. Because the truth is, you never really know what's out there on those long, lonely roads. Sometimes, the greatest danger isn't what's lurking in the shadows, it's the shadows our own minds create. The shovel struck something hard, sending a jolt up my arms. I paused, wiping sweat from my brow with a muddy hand. We'd been digging for hours. The well was supposed to be nothing but dirt for at least another 10 feet. I called down to my son Jake, who was working beside me in the hole. "Hey, grab the flashlight, will you? I think we hit something." Little did I know that metallic clang would be the sound that changed everything. I'd inherited this farm from my uncle 6 months ago. It was a fixer-upper, to put it mildly, but it was a chance for a fresh start after the divorce. Jake and I threw ourselves into the work, fixing fences, repairing the barn, and now digging a new well. The old one had run dry years ago, and we needed water if we were going to make a go of this place. Jake shone the flashlight where my shovel had struck. The beam reflected off something smooth and metallic, a stark contrast to the dark earth surrounding it. "What is that, Dad?" Jake asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. I shrugged, already scraping away more dirt with my hands. "I don't know, Bud. Let's find out." As we dug, the object began to take shape. It was a metal container, about the size of a small suitcase. It looked old, the once shiny surface now pitted and corroded. My mind raced with possibilities. A time capsule, buried treasure, or just some farmer's junk tossed in and forgotten. It took another hour of careful digging to free the container from the earth. By then, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the field. We carried our find back to the barn, both of us silent, lost in thoughts about what might be inside. Under the harsh glare of the barn's floodlights, I examined the container closely. It was sealed tight, with no obvious way to open it. A faded inscription was barely visible on one side, but years of corrosion had made it illegible. "Should we open it?" Jake asked, practically bouncing with excitement. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to call the police, maybe even a lawyer. What if this was evidence of something? But curiosity won out. "All right," I said, reaching for a crowbar. "Stand back." It took some effort, but finally, the lid creaked open. The smell hit us first, musty and damp, like an old cellar inside, protected by layers of waxy paper, was a stack of documents and photographs. I picked up the first photo and held it under the light. It showed a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, smiling at the camera. The picture looked old, probably from the 1960s. Judging by her hairstyle and clothes, I turned it over in faded ink. The name Sarah Milligan, 1964, was written. Jake peered over my shoulder. Who's that, Dad?" I shook my head. "I don't know." But as I said it, a nagging feeling started in the pit of my stomach. The name Milligan sounded familiar, but I couldn't place why. We spent the next hour going through the contents of the box. More photos, all of the same young woman, Sarah, at various locations around what looked like this very farm. There were letters, newspaper clippings, and a small leather-bound journal. As I flipped through the journal, a yellowed newspaper clipping slipped out. The headline made my blood run cold. "Local woman still missing after 3 months." I read the article quickly, my heart pounding. Sarah Milligan had disappeared from her family's farm in the summer of 1964. Despite an extensive search, no trace of her was ever found. The article mentioned that Sarah's father, the farm's owner, was the primary suspect, but he was never charged due to lack of evidence. "Dad?" Jake's voice snapped me back to the present. "What's wrong?" I looked at my son, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jake, I think we just found evidence in a very old missing persons case." His eyes widened. "Really? Like a real mystery?" I nodded, my mind racing. "Yeah, Bud, a real mystery." I started gathering the documents carefully, not wanting to disturb them more than necessary. "We need to call the police." The next few hours were a blur. Deputies came out to the farm, followed by detectives and a crime scene unit. Our quiet little farmhouse became the center of a whirlwind of activity. Jake and I were questioned separately, each of us telling and retelling how we'd found the box. It was past midnight when things finally calmed down. The box and its contents were taken as evidence, and we were told not to discuss the case with anyone, as if we knew anyone to discuss it with. We were still new in town and barely knew our neighbors. I tucked Jake into bed, his head full of excitement about our discovery, but sleep eluded me. I sat at the kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee in front of me, staring out at the darkened fields. What had happened to Sarah Milligan, and why did her name sound so familiar? The next morning, I drove into town determined to do some digging of my own. The local library was small, but it had archives of the town's newspapers going back decades. I spent hours poring over my brofiche, reading everything I could find about the Milligan case. Sarah had been 23 when she disappeared, engaged to be married. Her fiancé reported her missing after she didn't show up for a date. The last person to see her was her father, James Milligan, who claimed she'd left the farm to run errands in town. As I read, pieces started to fall into place. James Milligan, that was my uncle's name, the uncle who had left me this farm. With a growing sense of dread, I realized why Sarah's name sounded familiar. My mother had mentioned her once years ago, a cousin who had gone missing before I was born. I left the library in a daze, my mind reeling. Had my uncle been involved in Sarah's disappearance? I inherited not just a farm, but a dark family secret. When I got home, there was a police car in the driveway. Detective Reeves, the lead investigator, was waiting for me. Double quotes, Mr. Collins, she said as I got out of my truck. We need to talk. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd spent a sleepless night. Detective Reeves didn't waste time on pleasantries. We've identified the DNA on some of the items in the box, she said, her eyes locking with mine. It matches Sarah Milligan. We're now treating this as a homicide investigation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Mr. Collins, I have to ask, did you know anything about this before you found that box? I shook my head vehemently. No, absolutely not. I inherited this farm from my uncle 6 months ago. I never even met him. She raised an eyebrow. Your uncle? I took a deep breath. James Milligan, Sarah's father. Detective Reeves leaned back, surprised. You're related to the Milligans. I explained what I'd learned at the library, the connection I'd only just discovered. As I talked, I could see the wheels turning in the detective's mind. Mr. Collins, I'm going to be straight with you, she said, when but what came out was just one word. Dad, why? He looked down, swallowing hard. I know I can't undo the past. I've made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But I needed you to know I'm here now. I want to try if you'll let me. For a moment, all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Mia's hand found mine, steadying me. The blue sedan's headlights cast long shadows, but in that moment, it felt like the darkest part of my life was finally stepping into the light. Because sometimes, the greatest fear isn't what's chasing you on the road, it's facing what you left behind. This complicates things. We're going to need to conduct a thorough search of the property, and I'm afraid you and your son will need to find somewhere else to stay for a while. I nodded numbly. Of course, whatever you need. The next few weeks were a nightmare. Our farm turned into a crime scene as police and forensic teams scoured every inch. Jake and I moved into a motel in town, watching helplessly as our new home was torn apart in search of evidence. The story quickly spread, from local news to national headlines. Suddenly, our quiet town was flooded with reporters and true crime enthusiasts, all hungry for details about the mysterious box, about Sarah Milligan, and about the farmer who'd inherited a decades-old secret. I tried to shield Jake from the worst of it, but it was impossible. He was old enough to understand the basics, and his initial excitement about solving a mystery gave way to a heavier, somber reality. It was Jake who finally broke the silence, with the question I'd been avoiding. Dad, do you think Uncle James did it? Do you think he killed Sarah? I pulled him close, wishing I had a better answer. I don't know, buddy. I really don't. As the investigation dragged on, more details surfaced. Old case files were reopened, witnesses re-interviewed. The picture that emerged was a tragic one. Sarah wanted to leave the farm and start a new life with her fiancé. James Milligan opposed the marriage, wanting Sarah to stay and help run the family business. But there was no smoking gun, no confession, just circumstantial evidence and a family torn apart by secrets and suspicion. After nearly 2 months, we were finally allowed to return home. The police had found no new evidence, and while the case remained open, they had no reason to keep us away. But the farm felt different. Every creaking floorboard, every rustle in the fields whispered of long-buried secrets. I found myself avoiding the spot where we'd found the box, as if Sarah's ghost lingered there, settling back into our routine. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were living in the shadow of a tragedy. What was supposed to be a fresh start now felt tainted, haunted by echoes of the past. Yet we stayed, not just because we had nowhere else to go, but because it felt like we owed it to Sarah to bring her story out of silence, to honor her memory. I don't know if we'll ever truly learn what happened to Sarah Milligan, but her story and the secrets buried on this farm are now part of our lives. Somehow, we'll find a way to live with that, to build our own future on this land. Every time I pick up a shovel, I can't help but wonder what other secrets might be buried beneath our feet, and I ask myself, are some things better left undiscovered? The first time I spotted the blue sedan, I thought nothing of it. By the third time, my palms were sweating on the steering wheel. By the fifth, I was fighting the urge to scream. What started as a carefree road trip with my girlfriend had become a nightmarish mile, bringing us closer to a confrontation I knew we couldn't avoid. I checked the rearview mirror for what felt like the 100th time, seeing those familiar headlights again. The chilling certainty hit me. Our past had caught up with us, and it was driving that blue sedan. My name's Alex. Until 3 days ago, I thought I knew what fear was. I'd been scared before, who hasn't? But true terror, the kind that seeps into your bones and turns your world upside down, that was new. And it all began with a car that just wouldn't leave us alone. Mia and I had been planning this cross-country road trip for months. Both burned out from our jobs in New York. We needed a break. The plan was simple. Drive from New York to California, taking our time, seeing the sights, and reconnecting away from the city's chaos. The first 2 days were perfect. Singing along to cheesy pop songs, eating junk food at roadside diners, marveling at how big and beautiful the country was. We were somewhere in Ohio when I first noticed the blue sedan, a glimpse in the rearview mirror. A nondescript car, maybe a Toyota or Honda, a few cars behind us on the highway. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Why would I? It was just another car on a busy road. But then, about an hour later, we stopped for gas. I saw the same car pull into a pump across from us. Again, I didn't register it. Lots of people need gas, right? It wasn't until lunch at a diner in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, that a flicker of unease crept in. As we left, the blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. Its tinted windows hid the driver's face, but something about the car made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I mentioned it to Mia as we got back on the road. "Hey, does that blue car look familiar to you?" She glanced back, then shrugged. "Maybe it's just a common car, probably a coincidence." I tried to believe her, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I started paying closer attention, watching my mirrors. Sure enough, the car was always there, a few cars behind, never getting too close, but never falling behind either. By the time we crossed into Illinois, I was certain we were being followed. The blue sedan was there, at every rest stop, every gas station, every time we pulled over to stretch or take in a view. Mia saw how tense I was. "Alex, you're being paranoid," she said, but I heard uncertainty in her voice. "Why would anyone be following us?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. We were just a normal couple on a road trip. Who would want to follow us? Still, I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Approaching Chicago, I made a decision. "We're going to lose them," I told Mia, taking a sudden exit off the highway. "Alex, what are you doing?" she asked, gripping the dashboard. "Trust me," I said, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "If they're really following us, we'll find out now." I drove us through a maze of suburban streets, making random turns, doubling back on ourselves. For a while, I thought we'd lost them, but as we merged back onto a main road, I saw it. The blue sedan was still behind us. Double quotes, "Oh my God," Mia whispered. "You were right." Fear gave way to determination. I pressed down on the accelerator, weaving through traffic, taking random exits and back roads, no matter what I did. The blue sedan stayed just within sight. As night fell, we found ourselves on a lonely highway somewhere in western Illinois. We hadn't seen another car for miles, just us and the blue sedan. Its headlights burning in my rearview mirror. "We need to confront them," I said, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "This has gone on long enough." Mia looked at me, pale in the dashboard light. "Are you sure that's safe?" I wasn't sure about anything anymore, but I knew we couldn't keep running. We don't have a choice. We're almost out of gas, and can't keep driving forever. I saw a turnoff that had a dirt road, leading into a field. Without signaling, I made a sharp turn, kicking up dust as we bumped down the uneven track. The blue sedan followed. About a quarter-mile behind, I stopped the car and cut the engine. The sedan pulled up right behind us, its headlights illuminating our car in stark relief. "Stay in the car," I told Mia, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. "Lock the doors. If anything happens, drive away as fast as you can." Before she could protest, I was out of the car, squinting into the glare of the headlights. "Who are you?" I shouted. "Why are you following us?" For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the driver's door of the blue sedan opened. A figure stepped out, backlit by the headlights' features. Impossible to make out. "Alex," a familiar voice called out. My world tilted sideways. "Is that really you?" As the figure stepped forward, my legs went weak. It was a face I hadn't seen in 5 years, a face I never expected to see again. "Dad," I whispered. The man who had abandoned my mother and me when I was 17 stood before me, older, grayer, but unmistakably my father. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice shaking with a storm of emotions I couldn't untangle. "Why have you been following us?" He took another step forward, hands raised, as if to show he meant no harm. "I saw you in Ohio. I couldn't believe it at first. I've been trying to work up the courage to talk to you." I heard Mia's door open behind me. "Alex, what's going on?" My father's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "Is this your girlfriend?" I nodded, still too shocked to speak. "I'm sorry," he said, the tears clear in his voice. "I'm so sorry for everything. When I saw you, I couldn't let you go again without trying to make things right." 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Where had he been all these years? Why now? How did he expect to make up for 5 years of absence with what felt like a creepy highway stalking routine? But what came out was just one word. "Dad, why? You scared the hell out of us," he laughed. But it was a broken, sad sound. "I know. I didn't mean to. I didn't know how to approach you. Every time I worked up the courage, I'd lose it at the last second." Mia stepped beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "Maybe we should all talk," she said softly. "There's a diner about 10 miles back. We could grab some coffee and sort this out." I glanced at her, then back at my father. Part of me wanted to get back in the car and drive away, him standing there in the dust, just like he left us all those years ago. But another part I thought, long dead, wanted answers. "Okay," I said finally, "but we're taking separate cars, and if you try anything funny, we're gone. Understand?" He nodded, relief washing over his face. "Of course, whatever you want, Alex." As we drove toward the diner, following the blue sedan, Mia squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" she asked. I shook my head. "I don't know. I never thought I'd see him again. I don't know what to feel." She leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." That's what this trip was about, right? Facing things together. Asterisk. I managed a small smile. She was right. When we started this road trip, we talked about leaving our baggage behind, about making a fresh start. I never imagined that baggage would find us on the highway. Pulling into the diner parking lot, I took a deep breath. I didn't know what would come next, what explanations or excuses my father might offer. I didn't know if I could forgive him, or if I even wanted to try. But one thing was clear. This road trip had taken an unexpected turn, leading us not just across the country, but into the tangled web of my past. Whatever happened next, Mia was right, we'd face it together. I stepped out of the car, ready to confront the man who had followed us across 3 states, the man who had once been my father, ready to hear his story, and maybe, just maybe, to start writing a new chapter of our own, inside the diner. The smell of coffee and the hum of late-night conversations surrounded us. I realized then that sometimes, the most important journeys aren't the destinations we plan, but the unexpected detours that force us to face what we've been running from all along. The last time I saw Eliza Thompson, she was laughing. It's an image burned into my memory, her head thrown back, long dark hair catching the golden light of the sunset, the sound of her joy carried away by the sea breeze. I didn't know then it would be the last time. Less than 12 hours later, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions and a dread that threatened to swallow us whole. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning. My name's Michael Chen. I was a security officer aboard the Emerald Princess, a luxury cruise ship sailing the Caribbean. It was my 3rd year on the job, and I thought I'd seen it all: drunken brawls, petty theft, the occasional medical emergency. Nothing I couldn't handle. But Eliza's disappearance, that was something else entirely. That morning began like any other. I started my shift at 6 a.m., making rounds through the ship's corridors and public areas. Everything was quiet, most passengers still asleep in their cabins. Passing through the ship's grand atrium, I nodded to Eliza, who was finishing her night shift at the reception desk. "Morning, Michael," she said, stifling a yawn. "Anything exciting planned today?" I shrugged. "Just the usual. You should get some rest, you look beat." She laughed, gathering her things. "Oh, I will. But first, I'm going to watch the sunrise from my favorite spot on the upper deck. Want to join me?" I hesitated. I was on duty, but it was a quiet morning. Why not? I could use some fresh air. We made our way to a secluded spot on deck 16, leaning against the railing as the sky slowly brightened. Eliza closed her eyes, breathing in the salty air. "I love this," she said softly. "No matter how many cruises I do, it never gets old." I watched her out of the corner of my eye, struck by how peaceful she looked. We'd become friends over the past few months, sharing meals in the crew mess, and swapping stories during off hours. But in that moment, I realized how little I truly knew about her. "How long have you been working on cruise ships?" I asked. She opened her eyes, a wistful smile on her lips. 5 years now. It was supposed to be just a gap year after college, but I fell in love with the travel, the people, the adventure. I nodded, understanding completely. It was why I'd stayed with this job, despite the long hours and time away from home. We chatted a while longer as the sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant oranges and pinks. Finally, Eliza yawned again. "I should really get some sleep," she said. "Thanks for the company, Michael. See you later." I nodded, watching her walk away. That was the last time I saw her alive. The rest of my shift passed without incident. It wasn't until that evening, during the nightly staff meeting, that I realized something was wrong. "Has anyone seen Thompson?" our supervisor, Rita asked, frowning at her clipboard. She was supposed to start her shift an hour ago. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the room. It wasn't like Eliza to be late, let alone miss an entire shift. "I saw her this morning," I offered. She was heading to her cabin to sleep after her night shift. Rita's frown deepened. "Can you go check on her? Make sure she's okay?" I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach as I headed to the crew quarters. I knocked on Eliza's door, calling her name. No answer. Using my master key, I entered half expecting to find her asleep. The cabin was empty. The bed was made, looking untouched. Her uniform for the evening shift lay neatly on a chair. Her phone sat on the nightstand, its screen dark. I radioed Rita. "She's not here. The cabin looks like she hasn't been home since this morning." There was a long pause before Rita responded. "Initiate search protocol. Now." The next few hours were a blur. We searched every inch of the ship from the engine room to the upper decks. We reviewed security footage and interviewed crew and passengers. But there was no sign of Eliza. The last confirmed sighting was on security cameras. Outside her cabin at 7:12 a.m., the footage showed her entering her room and closing the door behind her, and then nothing. No footage of her leaving. No sign of disturbance. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. As the night wore on and our search came up empty, tension grew. Passengers noticed the increased security, whispering rumors. By morning, we had to face the facts. We had a missing person on our hands. The captain made an announcement, asking anyone with information to come forward. Eliza's photo was displayed throughout the ship. We contacted the nearest port authorities and the cruise line's headquarters. A Coast Guard search was launched, though we all knew the odds of finding someone in the vast Caribbean were slim. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was responsible. If only I'd walked her to her cabin that morning. If only I'd checked on her sooner. The image of her laughing in the sunrise haunted me. "Plans for the day?" the detective asked. I shook my head. No. She seemed happy, relaxed even, looking forward to some rest. His eyes narrowed. "And you're sure she went into her cabin?" "Yes," I replied for what felt like the 100th time. "The security footage confirms it." He nodded, making notes. "And there's no way she could have left without being caught on camera." I hesitated. It shouldn't have been possible. Corridor outside the crew cabins was monitored 24/7. But as I said it, a chill ran down my spine, because if it wasn't possible, then how had it happened? Days passed, and the mystery only deepened. Eliza's cabin was thoroughly searched. Nothing unusual was found. Her passport, wallet, and all personal belongings were there. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. Theories circulated among crew and passengers alike. Some believed she had somehow fallen overboard, but how she could have done so without anyone noticing was unclear. Others whispered about suicide, but those who knew Eliza dismissed that outright. She'd been happy, with no signs of depression or distress. The most disturbing theory the one that haunted me most, was that someone on the ship was responsible. The thought that a killer could be walking among us was almost too horrifying to imagine. As the days stretched into weeks, the investigation ran into dead end after dead end. The ship completed its scheduled cruise and returned to port, where more intensive forensic work could be done. But even with the full resources of law enforcement, no new leads emerged. Eliza's family flew in, their faces drawn with worry and grief. I watched from a distance as they were briefed by investigators, saw her mother collapse into sobs as the weight of reality sank in. I wanted to approach them, offer some comfort, but what could I possibly say? Eventually, the Emerald Princess set sail again, with a new crew member replacing Eliza at the reception desk. Life on board returned to normal, or at least the semblance of it. But for those of us who had known her, who had searched for her, who had been left with nothing but questions, things would never be the same. I stayed on with the cruise line, unable to leave, while Eliza's fate remained unknown. Each new port brought a flicker of hope. Maybe some clue would surface. Maybe someone somewhere had seen something. But as months passed with no new information, that hope began to fade. Asterisks sometimes. In the quiet hours of the night, I find myself on deck 16, staring out at the endless sea. I think about Eliza, her laugh, the way she loved watching the sunrise. I wonder where she is now, if she's still out there somewhere. And I can't help but feel the ocean knows the truth, holding its secrets deep in its unfathomable depths. The disappearance of Eliza Thompson remains an unsolved mystery, a ghost story, whispered among cruise ship crews. For me, it's a constant reminder of how fragile our sense of security is, how easily a life can vanish without a trace. Every time I see a passenger enter their cabin, every time I watch a security camera feed, I wonder, could it happen again? In this floating city of steel and glass, surrounded by the vast, indifferent sea, are any of us truly safe? The Emerald Princess sails on, carrying its cargo of vacationers and secrets. And somewhere out there, maybe Eliza is still laughing, her voice carried away by the endless ocean breeze. The first slash in the tent canvas was so perfect, so surgical, it almost seemed deliberate. I traced my finger along the frayed nylon threads. Whatever had done this wasn't just sharp bit, was wickedly so. As the fading daylight filtered through the precise cut, casting long shadows across the abandoned campsite, a cold dread settled over me. We had stumbled into something far more sinister than a simple bear attack. My name's Alex. I've been hiking the Appalachian Trail with my best friend Jamie for the past month. We're experienced backpackers, used to the challenges of long distance trekking, but nothing in all our years outdoors could have prepared us for what we found deep in the Georgia wilderness. The day started like any other. We broke camp at dawn, hoping to cover about 15 miles before nightfall. The weather was perfect, cool and crisp, with just enough breeze to keep the bugs away. We made good time, stopping only for quick lunches and water breaks. Late afternoon, Jamie spotted the first sign something was wrong. "Hey, Alex," he called, pointing to a tree just off the trail. "Check this out." I walked over, squinting at the trunk. Carved deep into the bark was a crude symbol, a circle with a jagged line through it. The cuts were fresh, the exposed wood still oozing sap. "Weird," I muttered. "Never seen a trail marker like that before." Jamie shrugged. "Probably just some kid messing around." We pressed on, but a growing unease gnawed at me. The forest was quieter than usual, the usual chorus of birdsong and insect buzz oddly muted. I could have sworn I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, but every time I turned to look, nothing was there. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, we searched for a campsite. That's when we saw the clearing. It was perfect, a small, level area nestled between two rocky outcroppings, with a babbling stream nearby. But as we approached, it became clear we weren't the first to find this spot. The remains of a campsite lay scattered as if its occupants had vanished mid-stay. A tent stood in the center, its door flap open and swaying gently in the breeze. A small cooking pot sat on a cold fire pit. Backpacks and sleeping bags were scattered about, abandoned, as if their owners fled in a hurry. Jamie and I exchanged glances. This wasn't normal. Even the messiest campers usually pack up before moving on. "Hello," Jamie called out. "Anyone here?" His voice echoed through the clearing, answered only by the soft gurgle of the stream and rustling leaves overhead. We approached cautiously. That's when I noticed the slashes in the tent. 1, 2, 3 dozens of them, each precise and deliberate. "What the hell?" I breathed, peering inside. The interior was a mess: sleeping bags shredded, clothes strewn about. A flashlight lay on its side, its beam casting eerie shadows across the ground. It illuminated a small notebook. I picked it up and flipped to the last entry. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. "Day 3. It's still out there. We hear it moving around the camp at night. The others think I'm crazy, but I know what I saw. It's not a bear. It's not anything natural. God help us if it gets in." I showed the notebook to Jamie, watching the color drain from his face. "We should go," he whispered. But as I turned to leave, Something caught my eye. Half hidden beneath a torn sleeping bag was a camera. My hands shook as I picked it up, praying the battery wasn't dead. It wasn't. The screen flickered to life, showing the last image taken. My heart nearly stopped. The photo was dark, clearly taken at night, but just at the edge of the frame, illuminated by the flash, was something. A shape almost human, but not quite. Long, spindly limbs. A face. Something else entirely. That was more shadow than substance size, reflecting the camera's flash like a cat's, but far larger and more unsettling. I dropped the camera, stumbling backwards. We need to leave, now. But as I turned, a cold wave of dread hit me. The sun had almost set. The forest around us was sinking into twilight, shadows stretching and merging into an impenetrable gloom. Jamie was already gathering his pack. "We can make it back to the trail if we hurry," he said, his voice tight with tension. "We'll hike through the night if we have to." I nodded and grabbed my backpack. But as I turned to go, something shiny caught my eye. Half buried in the soft earth near the fire pit was a small silver locket. Without thinking, I scooped it up and slipped it into my pocket. We set off at a brisk pace, trying to retrace our steps in the fading light, but nothing looked familiar. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches stretching out like gnarled fingers. More than once, I thought I heard movement in the underbrush just out of sight every time I looked. "Remember that weird symbol we saw earlier?" Jamie panted as we pushed through a dense thicket. "I think I see another one." He was right. Carved into the bark of a massive oak was the same circle and jagged line symbol, though this one was older, edges weathered, moss-covered. "Probably just a coincidence," I said, not really believing it. "Come on, we need to keep moving." But as we pressed forward, more symbols appeared, some fresh, others ancient. It was as if they were guiding us somewhere, though I had no idea where. The darkness was nearly complete now. Our headlamps cast small islands of light into a sea of black. The forest had gone silent, save for the crunch of our boots on leaves, and our ragged breathing. Then we heard Ida, low guttural sound, somewhere between a growl and a moan. It seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere, all at once. Jamie froze. What was that? I shook my head, speechless. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but panicking would only get us more lost. We pushed on quietly, but the sounds grew. Closer. Branches snapped behind us. Something rustled in the canopy overhead. Then, just ahead, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A shape tall and impossibly thin slipped between two trees. In the brief flash of my headlamp, I saw elongated pale limbs and a face that was little more than a dark void, with pinpricks of reflected light where eyes should be. "Run," I yelled. All thought of stealth vanished as we crashed through the underbrush, driven by blind panic. Branches whipped at our faces, roots threatened to trip us. Behind us, the sounds grew louder in human shrieks and guttural growls. I don't know how long we ran it, could have been minutes or hours, but suddenly, we burst out onto a wide gravel road. A park ranger station stood just ahead, its windows glowing warmly in the night. We staggered toward it, gasping for breath. As I reached the door, I glanced back toward the forest. There, at the edge of the trees, stood the figure, tall, impossibly thin, limbs too long for its body. It raised a claw-like hand as if to pursue us into the light, but then it turned and melted back into the shadows, in seconds. It was gone, leaving no trace but the terror it left behind. The rangers were skeptical, attributing our story to exhaustion, dehydration, and overactive imaginations. But they did send out a search party to investigate the campsite we described. They found nothing. No slashed tent, no scattered gear, not even a trace of a campfire. It was as if the entire scene had vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, Jamie and I recovered in a nearby town. I often thought about the silver locket I'd pocketed in my panic when I finally worked up the courage to open it. I found a small photo inside a smiling family. Mother, father, 2 kids, posed in front of a clearing. I recognized all too well. I never reported finding the locket. Part of me knew it would only bring more questions. I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Jamie and I never finished our hike. By unspoken agreement, we packed up and went home. Our Appalachian Trail adventure cut short. We don't talk much about what happened in those woods, but sometimes, on dark nights, when the wind whispers through the trees, I find myself thinking about that abandoned campsite, about the thing we saw, and I wonder with a chill that sinks deep into my bones if, somewhere out there, in the darkest wilderness, it's thinking about us too. The scream that tore through the cab of my truck that night wasn't human. It couldn't have been. No person could make a sound so raw, so primal, filled with a terror so deep it made my blood run cold. But it came from the man sitting beside me, the hitchhiker I'd picked up an hour earlier. His eyes flew open, reflecting the dashboard lights, like some wild animals. I knew then, with sickening certainty, that whatever had just happened or whatever nightmare he'd seen was far from over. My name's Jack. I've been driving big rigs across the country for nearly 2 decades. I've seen my share of strange things out on the lonely highways, ghost lights, weird weather, even the occasional UFO if you catch me after a few beers. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for that moonless night in the middle of nowhere, Nevada. It started as a routine haul, Phoenix to Seattle, trailer full of electronics. I was making good time, miles melting under my wheels as I cruised through the desert night. The radio kept me company, old country tunes and late night talk shows about conspiracy theories and alien abductions. I was halfway through Nevada when I saw him, a lone figure standing by the side of the road. Thumb out. I'm not usually one to pick up hitchhikers, too many horror stories, too many risks. But something about this guy made me slow down. Maybe it was the lost look in his eyes, or the way he hugged himself against the chill desert wind. Before I knew it, I was pulling over. "Where you headed?" I called as he approached. "Anywhere but here," he whispered. I should have driven off then. Instead, I found myself saying, "Hop in. I'm headed to Seattle, if that works for you." He climbed in, bringing the smell of dust and something else, something I couldn't place. Up close, he looked young, maybe mid-20s, with shaggy brown hair and eyes that darted nervously around the cab. "I'm Jack," I said, pulling back. "Onto the highway." "Mike," he replied, not meeting my gaze. "Thanks for the ride." We drove in silence for a while. The only sounds were the engine's rumble and the whisper of tires on asphalt. I tried to make conversation a few times, but Mike's answers were short, monosyllabic at best. Eventually, I gave up and focused on the road. About an hour later, I noticed Mike had fallen asleep, his head leaning against the window. I turned the radio down, not wanting to disturb him. That's when things got weird. It started with a twitch, a small movement of his hand. Then his breathing changed, becoming rapid and shallow. His eyes moved frantically behind closed lids, as if he were trapped in a nightmare. I was about to wake him, worried he might be having a seizure, when he started muttering. At first, it was too low to hear, but it quickly grew louder. "No. No, please. Don't let it find me." A chill ran down my spine. His voice was pure, unfiltered terror. "Hey, buddy," I said, reaching out to shake his shoulder. "Wake up. You're having a nightmare." But he didn't wake. Instead, his muttering grew frantic, his body thrashing in the seat. "It's coming. Oh God, it's coming. Can't you see it? Can't you see its eyes?" Then he let out that scream, the one that nearly made me lose control of the truck. His eyes flew open, wild and unfocused, reflecting the green glow of the dashboard like a nocturnal animal's. I pulled over, heart pounding. "Mike, snap out of it." He turned to me, but his eyes weren't on me. They were seeing something else, something beyond. "It followed me," he whispered hoarsely. "Oh God, Jack, It followed me into the truck. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. What followed you, Mike? There's nothing here but us. He shook his head violently. You can't see it, but it's here. It's always here. His eyes darted around the cab, tracking something invisible. We have to get out now. Before I could stop him, he flung open the passenger door and leaped into the night. I cursed, fumbling with my seatbelt as I followed him out. The desert night was cold and still. The only sounds were the ticking of the cooling engine and Mike's ragged breaths as he stood a few feet from the mic, wrapped his arms around himself, trembling like a leaf. I approached cautiously, like you would a frightened animal. Mike, what's going on? What do you think is following you? He turned toward me, his face pale in the truck's headlights. I don't know what it is, but it's been after me for days. Ever since I found that thing in the desert. What thing? I asked, a sick feeling growing in my gut. With a shaking hand, Mike reached into his pocket and pulled out what looked like a small stone. But under the harsh glow of the headlights, I realized it wasn't a stone at all. It was an artifact, intricately carved with strange symbols I'd never seen before. The symbols seemed to shimmer and shift, almost as if they were alive. The barn was a cavernous structure, dim and cool compared to the sweltering heat outside. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight, streaming through gaps in the weathered boards. The air was thick with the smell of old hay, hand, something else, something chemical that I couldn't quite place. I started in one corner, sorting through piles of rusted farm equipment, moldering sacks of feed, and broken furniture. The work was monotonous, and my mind wandered as I hauled item after item to the growing pile outside. That's when I noticed a loose floorboard. I might have missed it entirely if my boot hadn't caught on the edge, nearly sending me sprawling. Curious, I knelt down to examine it. The board shifted easily under my hands, and as I lifted it, I saw a small space underneath, just big enough to hide something. The journal was wrapped in oilcloth, surprisingly well preserved considering its hiding place. I pulled it out and glanced over my shoulder guiltily, though I knew Mr. Harrison was off in the fields. It felt invasive reading someone else's private thoughts, but my curiosity got the better of me as I began to read. That curiosity quickly turned to confusion, then horror. The journal belonged to Dr. Elliot Harrison, dated 1954, Mr. Harrison's father, I realized. But this was no ordinary farmer. The pages detailed complex scientific experiments, far beyond anything I'd learned in agriculture school. Dr. Harrison wrote about attempts to create hardier, more productive livestock through genetic manipulation. But it wasn't just animals he experimented on. There were vague references to human subjects, volunteers from the local asylum. My hands shook as I turned to pages descriptions of failed experiments, creatures neither fully human nor animal, and sketches that turned my stomach. Throughout it all was a growing obsession, a conviction that he was on the verge of a breakthrough that would revolutionize agriculture and change the world. The final entry, dated 1963, was different. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. It's done. The experiment was a success, but at what cost? They're out there now, hiding in the woods, in the fields. I can hear them at night, scratching at the walls. God forgive me for what I've created. I snapped the journal shut, heart pounding. This had to be some sick joke, or the ramblings of a madman. There was no way any of it could be true, but even as I tried to rationalize it, memories of strange occurrences around the farm surfaced. The odd noises at night dismissed as wildlife. The areas of the property Mr. Harrison warned me to avoid. The way the cattle sometimes seemed spooked by something unseen. I shoved the journal back into its hiding place, mind reeling. I needed to get out of that barn, get some fresh air, clear my head. As I stepped outside, blinking in the harsh sunlight, I nearly ran into Mr. Harrison. Making progress? He asked, eyeing the growing pile of junk outside. I nodded, unable to trust myself to speak. Did he know? About the journal. About what his father had done. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if sensing my unease. "Everything all right, Sam? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I managed. "Just, it's hot in there. Needed some air." He nodded. "Take it slow. No need to overwork yourself. Come up to the house when you're done. I'll fix us some dinner." I watched him walk away, trying to reconcile the gruff old man I knew with the dark history I had just uncovered. Was he continuing his father's work, or was he just as much a victim of it as anyone else? That night, lying awake in the small apartment above the garage Mr. Harrison had given me, sleep wouldn't come. Every creak of the old building, every rustle from the fields beyond, set my nerves on edge. My mind kept circling back to the journal and the creatures Dr. Harrison had described. Were they still out there after all these years? A sudden noise outside my window made me bolt upright, a strange, guttural sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. My heart pounding, I crept to the window and peered out into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Then, movement caught my eye. Something was moving in the field beyond the barn. It was large, definitely not a cow, and its movements were jerky, unnatural. Then it turned, and in the moonlight, I caught a glimpse of its face. I stumbled back, biting back a scream. What I'd seen wasn't human, but it wasn't fully animal either. It was something in between, something that should not exist. The rest of the night, I lay huddled in bed, every muscle tense, listening to sounds of movement outside. When dawn finally broke, I was exhausted but relieved. Surely, in daylight, everything would make sense again. But as days passed, the strange occurrences multiplied. Tools would disappear, only to reappear in odd places. The cattle grew increasingly agitated, especially at night, more than once. I caught Mr. Harrison staring off into the woods with a troubled expression. I thought about leaving, packing up, and getting as far away from Willow Creek Farm as I could. But something held me back. Curiosity, maybe, or a sense of responsibility. Whatever Dr. Harrison had done, whatever he'd created, was still out there. And maybe, just maybe, there was something I could do about it. I began my own investigation, carefully at first. I reread the journal, making notes, trying to understand the science behind Dr. Harrison's experiments. I explored the far reaches of the property areas Mr. Harrison had warned me to avoid, looking for signs of the creatures. Slowly, I started to piece together the truth. The experiments hadn't ended with Dr. Harrison's last journal entry. They had continued, passed down from father to son. Mr. Harrison wasn't just aware of what his father had done. He was trying to fix it. It all came to a head one stormy night in late August. I was awakened by the sound of breaking glass and Mr. Harrison's shouts. I raced to the farmhouse, rain lashing at my face, to find the front door splintered and hanging off its hinges. Inside, chaos reigned. Furniture overturned, claw marks scoring the walls. And in the center of the living room stood Mr. Harrison, facing off against a creature that defied description, part human, part animal. Its body a patchwork of mismatched parts, eyes glowing with unnatural intelligence. "Sam," Mr. Harrison yelled when he saw me. Then I noticed the syringe on the mantella, large syringe filled with glowing blue liquid. Without thinking, I grabbed it and tossed it to Mr. Harrison. In one smooth motion, he caught it and plunged it into the creature's neck. The creature let out a howl that made my blood run cold. It thrashed wildly for a moment, then collapsed to the floor. Its body seemed to melt and reform before my eyes. Within moments, all that remained was a very human-looking, unconscious man. Mr. Harrison sank to his knees, his face a mask of exhaustion and relief. "It's over," he murmured. "It's finally over." In the days that followed, Mr. Harrison told me everything. How his father's experiments had created a handful of hybrid creatures. How they had hidden in the woods for decades, occasionally venturing out to terrorize the farm. how he had spent his life trying to find a cure, a way to reverse what his father had done. The man we captured that night was the last of them. With him cured, the long nightmare was finally over, but the weight of it, the dark legacy of Willow Creek Farm, would stay with me forever. I still work the farm with Mr. Harrison. We never speak of that night to anyone else. Who would believe us? But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the cornfields, I find myself scanning the tree line, wondering if we truly found them all. I can't help but think about the thin line between scientific progress and playing God, and how easy it is to cross that line, even with the best of intentions. The secrets of Willow Creek Farm are buried now, as they should be, but the lessons about responsibility, about the unforeseen consequences of our actions, they will stay with me always, and I'll never look at a quiet rural farm the same way again. The footprints ended abruptly in the middle of the field, as if their owner had simply vanished into thin air. I stood there, flashlight in hand, my mind struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. 20 years on the force, and I'd never encountered anything like this. The car was still running, keys in the ignition, the driver's personal belongings untouched. It was as if the driver had stepped out for a moment, and just disappeared. Little did I know, this seemingly routine call would lead me down a rabbit hole of inexplicable events and unsolved mysteries that would haunt me for years to come. My name's Sarah Jennings. I've been a state trooper in Nevada for 2 decades. I thought I'd seen it all: high-speed chases, horrific accidents, even the occasional UFO report from some poor soul who'd been out in the desert heat too long. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night on a lonely stretch of Highway 50, deep in the heart of what locals call the loneliest road in America. It started as a typical night shift. I was cruising along the highway, more tumbleweed than traffic, keeping me company when the call came in. A passing motorist had reported an abandoned vehicle on the side of the road, hazard lights blinking. Standard procedure: ride, check it out, call a tow if necessary, and be on my way. As I pulled up behind the vehicle, a late model sedan, nothing remarkably, noticed something odd. The engine was still running. I approached cautiously, one hand on my holster out of habit. The driver's side door was slightly ajar, but there was no sign of the driver. I shone my flashlight inside. Everything looked normal. A half-empty water bottle in the cup holder, a phone charging on the dashboard, a duffel bag in the back seat. No signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing to indicate foul play. "Hello?" I called out, sweeping my flashlight across the surrounding area. "Anyone there?" "Highway patrol only." The whisper of the desert wind was the only answer. That's when I noticed the footprints, a single set leading away from the driver's side door into the field adjacent to the highway. They were clear and purposeful, not the staggering tracks of someone injured or disoriented. I radioed in my situation and began to follow the trail. The field was mostly bare scrub, brush, and hard-packed earthies. To see the trail in the beam of my flashlight, I expected to find the driver relieving himself behind a bush, or maybe having wandered off in confusion. Instead, I found nothing. The footprints stopped abruptly about 50 yards into the field. One moment they were there, clear as day. The next dash, nothing, just undisturbed earth, stretching out into the darkness. I stood there for a long moment, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. People don't just vanish. There had to be an explanation. I searched the area thoroughly, widening my circle, looking for any sign of disturbance. Nothing. No scuff marks to indicate someone had jumped or been lifted. No signs of a struggle. Just those footprints ending in the middle of nowhere. By the time backup arrived, I was sweating, despite the cool night air. My colleague Mike took one look at my face and knew something was off. "What have we got, Sarah?" he asked, his hand instinctively moving to his holster. I explained the situation, showing him the car and the footprints and their impossible ending. He followed me out into the field, his bewilderment growing with each step. "This is weird," he said finally, standing at the end of the trail. "Really weird." We called in forensics and had the area cordoned off. The next few hours were a blur of activity photographing the scene, taking casts of the footprints, searching the vehicle. The driver was identified as David Chen, 37, a software engineer from San Francisco. His family was contacted. No, they hadn't heard from him. Yes, he was driving to visit them in Denver. No, he had no history of mental illness or erratic behavior. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the field, we were no closer to an explanation. David Chen had simply vanished, leaving behind a running car and a set of footprints that led nowhere. The investigation intensified as search parties scoured the area, and helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned miles around. David's phone records, bank statements, and internet history were thoroughly examined. Missing persons bulletins were issued across multiple states, yet no clues surfaced, nothing to explain his disappearance. Speculation ran wild, each theory more far-fetched than the last. Some believed he had been abducted by criminals, cults, or even aliens. Others suggested he staged his own vanishing act. Rumors circulated about secret government experiments or portals to other dimensions. I tried to stay grounded, focusing on facts, but the deeper I dug, the stranger the case became. A week after David vanished, I received an anonymous tip. The caller's voice was trembling, disguised by a modulator. He urged me to investigate something called the Highway of Tears. At first, I dismissed it as nonsense, but the caller's urgency stayed with me. That night, unable to sleep, I began researching, and what I found chilled me to the bone. The Highway of Tears wasn't just one road. It was a phenomenon reported across multiple states and even countries. Lonely stretches where people vanished without a trace, often leaving behind vehicles in perfect working order. Some witnesses reported strange lights in the sky. Others spoke of a disorienting loss of time, the world around them seeming to warp and shift. The more I researched, the more cases I found that mirrored David's, like the woman in Alaska whose car was found running, purse on the seat, footprints leading into the snow and then abruptly stopping, or the truck driver in Australia who disappeared during a routine delivery, his rig left idling on the outback highway. I compiled files, cross-referencing cases, looking for patterns. Most disappearances happened at night, many in remote locations. Several witnesses mentioned electronic malfunctions, radios cutting out, phones losing signals just before the disappearances. As my off-duty hours were consumed by this research, I felt myself changing. I grew jumpy, paranoid. Every time I patrolled Highway 50, I found myself scanning the horizon, half expecting to see strange lights or shadowy figures. My colleagues noticed. Mike confronted me one night over coffee at the station. "Sarah, you've got to let this go," he said, eyes full of concern. "The Chen case is cold. It's eating you up." I wanted to tell him everything about the Highway of Tears, the patterns I'd discovered, but I knew how it would sound. They'd take me off active duty, maybe send me to psych, so I nodded, promising to take some time off to clear my head, but I couldn't let it go. The very next night, I found myself back on Highway 50 off duty, in my own car, loaded with cameras and scanning equipment borrowed from a friend in the UFO watching community. I didn't know what I expected. Proof, maybe, something to make sense of the senseless, to explain the unexplainable. What I got was something else entirely. Just after midnight, my radio crackled with static. At first, I dismissed it. The reception out here was often spotty. Then I noticed the dashboard lights flickering, the headlights dimming and brightening erratically. My heart pounded. I pulled over to the roadside. This was it, the electronic interference reported in other cases. I grabbed my camera, ready to document whatever came next. Then I saw it, a light in the field beside the highway. Not a flashlight or vehicle headlight, but something else. It pulsed with a soft bluish glow, hovering about 6 feet off the ground. I stepped out of the car, camera forgotten in my hand. The light seemed to beckon me, pulling me forward. I took a step, then another. A voice somewhere deep in my mind screamed at me to stop, to get back in the car, to drive away as fast as I could. But that voice was drowned out by an overwhelming sense of curiosity, of longing. I had to know what the light was. I had to understand. I don't know how long I walked. Time lost all meaning. The light stayed just ahead, always just out of reach. I was vaguely aware of my feet moving, the brush scraping my legs. Then suddenly, the light was gone. I blinked, disoriented. The spell was broken. I found myself standing in the middle of a field. No idea how far I'd come. I turned back toward the highway, expecting to see my car's headlights. There was nothing, no car, no highway dot, just empty desert stretching out in all directions, silvered by the light of a moon I didn't remember seeing before. Panic set in. I spun around, trying to get my bearings. That's when I saw them footprints in the dirt. My footprints, leading to where I stood, and beyond them, another set. Familiar prints I'd seen once before, ending abruptly in the middle of nowhere. I stood frozen, my mind reeling as the full weight of my situation crashed down on me. I understood now I was no longer just an investigator. I had become part of the mystery. As the first light of dawn crept across the horizon, I made a decision. I would follow those footprints. Dr. Chen's footprints. Whatever had happened to him, whatever lay beyond that impossible ending, I would find out. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for whatever came next. Then I stepped forward, leaving my own trail in the desert sand. Somewhere out there, in the vast emptiness of the Nevada desert, there's an abandoned car with its engine still running, and a set of footprints leading nowhere. The highway of tears had claimed another victim, and I had become just another unsolved mystery on the loneliest road in America. The first footprint appeared like a ghostly imprint in the morning, too human-shaped, yet far too large to belong to any of us. I stared at it, coffee mug forgotten in my hand, as the rising sun cast long shadows over our ravaged campsite. Our food was scattered everywhere, tents slashed, and an eerie silence hung in the air where birdsong should have been. But it was that massive footprint that sent a chill down my spine. Whatever had visited us in the night was no ordinary animal, and I had a sick feeling it wasn't done with us yet. My name is Alex. This camping trip was supposed to be a chance for my family to reconnect, to escape the constant buzz of technology, and remember what it was like just to be together. My wife Sarah, our 2 kids, Lily and Max, and I had spent months planning this getaway to Blue Pine Campground, a remote site nestled deep in the mountains. We arrived late yesterday afternoon, the kids buzzing with excitement as we set up tents and gathered wood for the fire. As the sun set, we roasted marshmallows and told ghost stories, our laughter echoing through the trees. It felt perfect, like we'd finally found a way to pause the hectic pace of life and just breathe. If only I'd known how quickly our idyllic retreat would turn into a nightmare. The first sign that something was wrong came in the middle of the night. I awoke too, rustling outside our tent, too loud for a raccoon or any small wildlife we'd been warned about. Grabbing my flashlight, I unzipped the tent flap and peered out. The beam caught a flash of movement at the edge of the campsite, something large, ducking behind a tree, too fast to make out its shape. Heart pounding, I zipped the tent closed and lay awake for hours, listening to sounds of something big moving around us. When morning came, the full extent of the intrusion was clear. Our cooler had been appended, its contents scattered on the ground. Claw marks scored the sides of our tents, and there in a patch of bare earth was that enormous footprint. Alex, what's going on? Sarah's voice snapped me out of my daze. She stood in the tent entrance, eyes wide, as she took in the scene. I tried to keep calm for her sake. Looks like we had a visitor. Last night, I said. Probably a bear. But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't true. Bears don't leave footprints like that. As Sarah woke the kids, and we began to clean up the mess, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. The forest around us seemed too quiet, the shadows between the trees too deep. "Dad, can we go home now?" Lily asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her voice small and frightened. I wanted nothing more than to say yes, to pack up and drive back to civilization. But when I tried to start the car, my blood ran cold. The engine sputtered and died, refusing to turn over, no matter how many times I tried. "It's okay," I told my family, trying to sound confident. "Probably just a dead battery. I'll hike down to the ranger station to get help." Sarah grabbed my arm, eyes wide with fear. "Asterisk, you can't go out there alone. What if whatever did this is still out there?" I hesitated. She was right. Of course, we had little choice. In the end, we decided to stick together. We packed some supplies and began hiking down the trail toward the ranger station. Under normal circumstances, it was only 5 miles an easy trek, but every snapping twig and rustling leaf frayed our nerves further. We were about halfway there when Max spotted something, a footprint pressed into a patch of mud beside the trail. It was even larger than the first and looked fresh. "It's following us," Sarah whispered, pulling the kids close. I wanted to reassure her, to say it was just a coincidence, but the words caught in my throat. Deep down, I knew she was right. We quickened our pace. The kids whimpered as branches scratched at their arms and legs. The sun was setting, and the forest grew darker by the minute. Still, the ranger station seemed no closer. Then we heard it, a low, rumbling growl, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Lily screamed. Max burst into tears. "Run," I shouted, scooping up Lily as Sarah grabbed Max's hand. We tore down the trail, blind panic driving us. Branches whipped at our faces, roots threatened to trip us with every step, and that growl grew louder, closer. I glanced back and instantly wished I hadn't. Something was moving through the trees, behind us, massive and dark. I caught a glimpse of glowing eyes and a flash of teeth before I turned and ran faster than I ever had. We burst into a small clearing, gasping for breath, and there, like a miracle, was a cabin. Not the ranger station we'd hoped for, but at that moment, it was salvation. I didn't stop to question our luck. We sprinted to the door, praying it would be unlocked. The handle turned under my grip, and we tumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind us. For a long moment, we stood there, chests heaving, listening. Outside, something large circled the cabin. Scratching noises scraped the walls, and a low, frustrated growl echoed through the night. "What is it, Daddy?" Lily whimpered, burying her face in my shoulder. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, stroking her hair, "but we're safe in here. It can't get us." As our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we took in the cabin's interior, a small one-room shelter with a fireplace, rustic furniture, and shelves lined with canned goods and supplies. It looked like some kind of emergency shelter or hunting cabin. Sarah found some lanterns and lit them, casting a warm glow around the room. The kids huddled together on a threadbare couch. Sarah pulled me aside, whispering with trembling voice, "Alex, what are we going to do? What if it doesn't leave?" I took a deep breath, trying to think rationally. "We've got shelter and enough food here to last a while. We'll wait it out. Someone will come looking for us eventually." But as the night wore on, that confidence began to fade. The creature outside showed no sign of leaving. We could hear it moving, testing the walls and door. Occasionally, it roared, a sound so powerful the windows rattled. The kids finally fell into an uneasy sleep, exhausted from the day's terror. Sarah and I took turns keeping watch, peering into the darkness. During my watch, in the darkest hours of night, I saw it clearly for the first time. The moon had slipped from behind the clouds, illuminating the clearing. There, at the edge of the trees, stood a creature that shouldn't exist. Masked, at least 8 feet tall. Its body seemed a patchwork of animal parts. Thick fur covered most of it, but patches of scales and feathers peeked through. Its face was a nightmarish blend of bear and something almost human. Eyes glowing an unnatural yellow in the moonlight. Frozen in horror, I watched as it turned those glowing eyes toward me. Then, impossibly, its smile rose, of razor-sharp teeth revealed. I stumbled back from the window, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be real. Creatures like that didn't exist. They couldn't. But the growl that rumbled through the night was all too real. I don't know how long we stayed in that cabin. Days blurred together, marked only by the rising and setting sun and the constant presence of the creature outside. We rationed food carefully, knowing we might be trapped for a long time. The kids, surprisingly resilient, turned our confinement into a game of sorts. But I could see the strain wearing on Sarah. The constant fear was taking its toll. On what I think was the 5th day, we woke to silence. No growls, no scratching at the walls. Cautiously, I peered out the window. The clearing was empty. We waited another full day before daring to venture outside. The forest seemed normal again, birds singing, small animals scurrying, but the claw marks on the cabin walls and the massive footprints in the mud were undeniable proof of what we'd been through. We made our way back to the campsite, half expecting it to be destroyed. Instead, we found park rangers and a search party. Our car had been fixed. Apparently, someone had noticed it abandoned and called it in. We told them a sanitized version of events. We'd gotten lost, found the cabin, and waited out a storm. Who would believe the truth? As we drove home, the kids chattered excitedly about their adventure, but I couldn't shake the feeling we'd glimpsed something we were never meant to see. A creature lurking in the shadows of the world, defying explanation. We never went camping again, but sometimes, on dark nights, when the wind howls outside our locked doors, I think about that cabin in the woods, and I wonder if somewhere out there, in the vast wilderness, that creature is still roaming, waiting for the next unsuspecting family to cross its path. The wilderness holds terrifying secrets, and sometimes those secrets have teeth and claws. The lifeboats were all still in place. If there had been an emergency evacuation, surely they would have been launched. A cold dread settled over me. I spent hours searching the ship, deck by deck, panic rising with every empty room and deserted corridor. The theater was mid-setup for the evening show. The casino slot machines blinked silently in the dim light. The main dining room tables were set for dinners that would never be served. Everywhere I looked, I found signs of interrupted life. Half-eaten meals at the buffet, laundry tumbling endlessly in the otherwise empty laundromat, a child's stuffed animal abandoned in the middle of a hallway. Yet, among the thousands who should have been aboard, I found no trace of a single person. As night fell, or what I assumed was night, given the strange bluish tint, I made my way to the bridge, hoping against hope to find someone, anyone, who could explain what was happening. The bridge was as deserted as the rest of the ship, but here at least there were signs of life. Radar screens blinked steadily, showing our position in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Navigation systems hummed softly, the ship continuing on course, its automated systems running without human oversight. I slumped into the captain's chair, exhaustion and fear finally overtaking me. What had happened? Where was everyone? And, most importantly, what was I going to do now? As I stared blankly at the array of instruments before me, something caught my eye. The date display on one of the monitors. I blinked. Sure, I was seeing things. But no, it read August 13th, 2024. A week. Somehow, impossibly, a week had passed since I'd laid down for my nap. I laughed a high hysterical sound that echoed strangely in the empty bridge. This couldn't be happening. People didn't just lose a week of time. Entire ships full of people didn't just vanish. And yet, here I was. The next few days, if they were even days, as time seemed to lose all meaning, passed in a blur. I roamed the ship, leaving notes in every public space, begging for a response. Any sign I wasn't alone. I tried every phone, every radio, every possible means of communication, but all I got was static. I ate from the slowly rotting supplies in the massive kitchens and slept fitfully in a different cabin each night to keep myself sane. I talked out loud, narrating my actions as if I were the protagonist in some bizarre reality show on what I think was the 4th day of my solitude. I saw lights dot at first. I thought I was hallucinating, my mind finally cracking under the strain of isolation. But no, there they were, distant pinpricks of light on the horizon, growing larger by the minute. Hope surged through me. Another ship. A rescue party. I raced to the bow, waving my arms and shouting, even though I knew they were too far away to see or hear me. As the lights grew closer, I realized with a start, they weren't coming from the sea, they were coming from the sky. My elation turned to confusion, then numb acceptance. Of course, why not? After everything else, why shouldn't there be strange lights in the sky? The lights descended slowly, hovering over the ship. They were beautiful, pulsing with colors I had no names for, casting shimmering reflections on the calm sea. As I watched, a beam of light shot down from the center of the formation, touching the deck just a few feet away. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the lights vanished, and I was no longer alone. The deck filled with people, passengers in swimsuits and sundresses, crew members in crisp uniforms. They milled about, confused, voices rising in a babble of questions and exclamations. What happened? Where did everyone go? Am I dreaming? I stood frozen, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. A man in a captain's uniform strode purposefully toward me, his face a mask of concern. Double quotes. Miss, are you all right? You look pale. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could I possibly explain what had happened? In the days that followed, as the ship made its way back to port, a story was pieced together. According to everyone else on board, no time had passed at all. One moment, they'd been going about their day. The next, they found themselves standing on the deck, disoriented and confused. Only I remembered the empty ship, the days of solitude, the strange lights. Only I had lived through that impossible week. The incident made headlines worldwide. Cruise ship reappears after mysterious disappearance. Experts were consulted. Theories proposed and debunked. Some spoke of wormholes, others of alien abduction. A few fringe voices suggested mass hallucination or an elaborate hoax. As for me, I gave my statement to authorities and retreated from the public eye. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? How could I describe the bone-deep loneliness of those days on the empty ship? The profound wrongness of a world slightly out of sync? I've never set foot on another cruise ship since. The sight of the ocean fills me with a nameless dread, and sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, I wake in a cold sweat, convinced I'm back there alone on an empty ship, adrift in a sea of time. I don't know what happened on the paradise of the seas. I don't know where everyone went, why I was left behind, or what those lights in the sky were. But I do know this: our understanding of reality, time, and space is far more limited than we think. There are forces at work out there, things we can't begin to comprehend, and sometimes, if we're very unlucky, we catch a glimpse of them, a peek behind the curtain of reality, into the vast, terrifying unknown that lies beyond. I got that glimpse, and it changed me forever. So, next time you're on a cruise or any ship and you feel a sudden chill, or notice the light shifting ever so slightly, or find yourself alone where you shouldn't be, remember my story, and hope with every fiber of your being, that you don't slip through the cracks of time, like I did. Because once you've experienced that kind of impossible solitude, you're never quite the same again. The scratches looked like they'd been made by something with very sharp claws. Come look at this, I called out. She came over, frowning, running her fingers over the marks. Weird. You think a bear tried to get in or something? Maybe, I said, but something about the scratches made my skin crawl. They seemed too deliberate, too purposeful. We went to bed, joking about ghost bears to lighten the mood. But as the night wore on and the scratching started, those jokes didn't seem so funny anymore. I lay there, muscles tense, listening as the sound moved around the cabin. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause, then the tapping on the window, like something was testing the glass. Emily stirred beside me. Double quotes, Dan, do you hear that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We clung to each other, barely breathing, as the tapping moved, from window to window. Finally, after what felt like hours, it stopped. We eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. At dawn, we tried to rationalize it. Raccoons, we decided, or maybe a particularly persistent owl. We spent the day hiking and swimming in a nearby lake. The bright sunshine made the terrors of the night seem distant, almost silly. But as evening fell and we returned to the cabin, the unease crept back in. We double-checked all the locks, drew the curtains tight, and tried to distract ourselves with board games and wine. The scratching started earlier that night, more insistent than before, and this time it was accompanied by something else. A low, guttural sound, almost but not quite a voice. Daniel, Emily whispered, her face pale in the lamplight. That's not an animal. I wanted to reassure her, to say it was just the wind, or our imaginations playing tricks on us. But as the not quite voice grew louder, forming sounds that were almost words, I couldn't. We huddled together on the bed, watching shadows under the door, listening to whatever was circling the cabin again and again. At one point, something heavy slammed against the front door, making the whole cabin shudder. I thought about running to the car, but the keys were in the living room, and the idea of opening any door felt impossible, so we waited, clinging to each other, as the night stretched on endlessly, just before dawn. In that darkest hour, when hope seems furthest away, we heard a new sound: footsteps on the porch. Then a knock at the door. A man's voice, gruff but blessedly normal. "Hello, anyone in there?" We approached cautiously. Through the peephole, I saw Bill, the cabin owner, standing on the porch with a flashlight. I opened the door, relief flooding me. "Bill, thank God. There's something out here," something. He cut me off, pushing past us into the cabin. "I know. That's why I'm here. You two, okay?" We nodded, still shaken. Bill did a quick check of the windows and doors, then turned to us with a grim expression. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have told you the whole truth when you got here, but I was afraid you'd leave him. I need the money." Emily demanded, "What the hell is going on here?" Bill sighed, suddenly looking much older. "This land, it's not right. Never has been. As long as I can remember, things have lived in these woods. Things that aren't natural. Most of the time they keep to themselves. But sometimes, especially when there's new blood around, they get curious." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of things?" He shook his head. "I don't rightly know. Never seen them clearly, but I've heard them, felt them watching. They're smart. Whatever they are, smart and hungry." "Why don't you leave?" Emily asked. Bill said simply, "This land's been in my family for generations. And besides," his voice dropped to a near whisper, "I don't think they'd let me." We spent the rest of the night huddled in the living room with Bill, listening to his stories, tales passed down through his family of people who'd vanished over the years, of nights when the barriers between our world and something else thinned as the sun rose, casting long shadows through the trees. Bill stood up, They'll be gone now. They can't stand the daylight. You two should pack up and go. I'll refund your money." We didn't argue. Within an hour, we were speeding down the mountain road, the cabin shrinking in the rearview mirror. We never talked much about that weekend. How could we explain it? Even between ourselves, we found it easier to let the memory fade and focus on normal, safe city life. But sometimes, on dark nights, when the wind blows just right, I find myself listening for that scratching sound, and in my dreams, I still hear that almost voice calling from just beyond the walls, trying to form words I hope I never understand. I don't know what lives in those woods. I don't know why it was so interested in us, or what might have happened if it got inside. But I do know this: there are places in this world where the veil between realities is thin, where things we can't comprehend lurk just out of sight. If you ever find yourself in a secluded cabin, miles from civilization, and hear scratching at the door or tapping at the window, remember my story. Keep the doors locked, draw the curtains, and whatever you do, don't let it in, because once you acknowledge those things in the dark, once you let them know you can hear them, they'll never stop calling, and sooner or later, curiosity or fear or simple lead you to answer. Take it from me. Some calls are better left unanswered. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and some woods are best left unexplored, no matter how inviting they seem in the light of day. A low, guttural sound came from behind me almost, but not quite. A voice. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. As I slowly turned around, there, in the doorway, stood something I still struggle to describe. In that brief moment before terror took hold, my mind tried desperately to make sense of what I was seeing. It was vaguely humanoid, but too tall, too thin, its limbs bent at impossible angles, and its face, God, its face was a blank expanse of pale skin, split top to bottom by a mouth that looked like a jagged tear. I'd like to say I fought, or that I ran, but the truth is, I froze rooted too. The spot as the thing unfolded itself, growing taller, flowing into the room like smoke given form. It reached for me with hands, more like claws, and I felt my consciousness slipping away. The last thing I remember was the CB radio crackling to life, that same desperate voice calling for help. I woke up in my truck, parked on the side of the highway. For a moment, I thought it had been a nightmare. Then I noticed the dust coating my clothes, the scratches on my arms, and there, on the passenger seat, was the CB radio from the abandoned truck stop. My logbook showed I'd lost almost 6 hours, 6 hours I had no memory of. I drove to the nearest town, checked into a motel, and tried to make sense of it all. Had I really seen what I thought I saw, or had my mind conjured some impossible horror to fill the gaps in my memory? I thought about going to the police, but what could I say? That I'd been lured to an abandoned truck stop by a ghost on the CB, then attacked by some kind of monster. They'd laugh me out of the station. Or worse, they might lock me up, for my own safety. In the end, I did the only thing I could: die. Got back on the road and finished my run, but nothing was the same after that night. I found myself jumping at shadows, flinching every time the CB crackled with static. I started avoiding long stretches of empty highway, even if it meant longer trips. And that CB radio, I couldn't get rid of it, but I couldn't keep it in my truck either. It sits in a storage unit now, wrapped in chains and locked in a box. Some nights, I swear I can hear it calling, the same desperate voice, begging for help. I've tried to find out more about the Starlight truck stop since then. Turns out, it has a dark history, stories of disappearances going back decades. Truckers who stopped there and were never seen again. Local legends about ancient burial grounds and doorways to other worlds. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know if what I experienced was real, or some kind of hallucination, or something in between. But I do know this: there are things out there in the darkness that we can't explain. things lurking on the edges of our world, waiting for someone to answer their call. So if you're ever out on the road late at night, and you hear a desperate voice begging for help on the sea, think twice before you answer. Because sometimes, the call for help isn't coming from someone in trouble. Sometimes, it's coming from the trouble itself. And if you find yourself driving past an abandoned truck stop in the New Mexico desert, keep driving. Don't look back, and whatever you do, don't stop, because you never know what might be waiting there. In the darkness, ready to pull you into a nightmare you might never wake from. As for me, I still drive, but never at night, if I can help it. And I keep my CB turned off no matter how lonely the road gets, because some calls are better left unanswered, and some mysteries are best left unsolved. My mouth went dry. Dr. Fredman shook his head slowly. We don't know what's behind this, but we think you might be in danger. Mr. Harper, these sights, they have strange effects on people close to them. He told me about cases of unusual behavior, people claiming to receive messages, even orders, from some unknown source. As he spoke, a chill ran down my spine. I thought of the whispers, those voices just on the edge of understanding, slipping into my dreams. What should I do? I asked. Let us set up monitoring equipment, he said firmly. And whatever you do, don't enter that field, no matter what you hear, no matter what you think you see. Promise me. I promised. But promises, I would soon learn, are hard to keep when reality unravels around you. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind. Dr. Fredman and his team set up cameras, sensors, and took soil samples, whispering worried theories among themselves. All the while, the whispers in my dreams grew louder, more insistent. I woke with strange symbols etched in my mind, my fingers itching to draw them. The urge to walk into that field, to reach the center of the circle, became overwhelming. Then came the seventh night. I was jolted awake by a sound unlike anything before. Low, thrumming vibration coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. I stumbled to the window. My heart stopped. The crop circle glowed, pulsing with a soft blue-white light beating in time with the thrumming, and there hovering above it were the lights I'd seen before, descending. I don't remember deciding to go outside. One moment I was at the window, the next I was running across the yard in pajamas, drawn toward the circle by a force I couldn't resist. Dr. Fredman's warning echoed in my head, but it felt distant, unimportant. All that mattered was reaching the center of the circle, meeting whatever was coming down from the sky. I was at the edge of the wheat field when a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back. It was Dr. Fredman, his face pale in the otherworldly light. Harper, he shouted over the thrumming. If you go in there, we'll lose you. I struggled against his grip, the whispers drowning out everything else. But he held firm, and slowly, painfully, the compulsion faded. We watched, transfixed, as the lights descended into the center of the crop circle. A flash blinding left spots dancing in my vision. Then nothing. The lights were gone. The thrumming stopped. The crop circle lay dark and still. In the days that followed, government agents swarmed the farm. The crop circle was dug up, every grain of soil tested. I was questioned for hours, as were Dr. Fredman and his team. They found nothing. No radiation. No unexplained elements. Nothing to prove anything extraordinary had happened. The official story became that it was an elaborate hoax, despite no evidence to support it. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. It's been 5 years since that night. I still farm this land, but things are different now. No matter what we plant, the wheat no longer grows in that field. On quiet nights, I sometimes think I can still hear those whispers at the edge of my mind. And when I look up at the stars, I can't shake the feeling that something up there is watching, waiting. I don't know what would have happened if I'd reached the center of that circle. I don't know what's coming, or when. But I do know this: we are not alone. The universe is stranger and far more terrifying than we imagine. So if you ever find strange patterns carved into your fields, or see lights in the sky that move like nothing you've ever seen, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't answer when they call, because once you do, there's no going back. The first photo showed nothing but trees. The second captured a blur of movement at the edge of the frame. But it was the third image that made my blood run cold. There, emerging from the shadows between two ancient pines, was a figure humanoid, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, its proportions distorted, defying natural law, and it was looking directly at the camera. At me. I lowered the viewfinder with shaking hands, eyes darting to the deepening shadows around my campsite. Night was falling, and I was no longer alone in these woods. My name is Maggie Chen. I've been a nature photographer for nearly a decade, trekking rainforests, scaling mountains, wading through swamps to capture the perfect shot. But nothing in all my years could have prepared me for what I found deep in the Olympic National Forest. It was supposed to be a routine assignment, a solo trip to capture the raw beauty of old growth forest for a conservation magazine. I'd done dozens like it and was looking forward to the solitude, to immersing myself in nature without distractions. The first few days were idyllic, towering evergreens draped in moss, hidden waterfalls, dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. I set up camp near a babbling stream and ventured out daily to explore and photograph. Then, on the fourth night, things started to get strange. I was reviewing shots on my camera when I noticed something. A shape just barely visible in the shadows between two trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of light, or maybe a deer, but something nagged at me the next day. I returned determined to find out what I'd captured. I set up a camera trap motion and activated to catch wildlife activity and left it there while I explored. That evening, when I checked the camera, my heart nearly stopped. Dozens of images, in rapid succession. At first, just forest floor and squirrels. Then, the figure appeared tall, impossibly thin, with long spindly limbs bending at unnatural angles. Its pale, translucent skin stretched tight over an inhuman frame, and its face smooth and featureless, except for two large dark eyes reflecting the camera's flash like a cat's. I stared, refusing to believe what I saw. This had to be a hoax, a prank, by some hiker with too much time and Photoshop skills. But as I flipped through the photos, a chill ran down my spine. The figure was moving closer with each shot. On the last image, it was reaching toward, the lens-long fingers blurred with motion. I packed my gear with shaking hands and practically ran back to camp. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every twig snap and leaf rustle. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that there had to be a logical explanation, but deep down, I knew what I saw was real. Morning brought worse news. My campsite was in disarray, my backpack emptied, contents strewn everywhere. The food cache, hung high to keep bears away, torn down. The rope snapped like thread, and pressed into the soft earth near my tent was a footprint, long and narrow, toes like claws. My camera lay nearby, with trembling fingers. I powered it on. New photos had been taken while I slept, images of my tent, and me inside, visible through the mesh window, and in every shot, the figure was there, closer. Closer. I should have left then, packed up and hiked out. Assignment be damned. But some mix of curiosity, stubbornness, and stupidity kept me there. I convinced myself I just needed one clearer shot, one moment of understanding to make sense of it all. Each night, the creature came closer. I set more camera traps, capturing it, circling my tent. I barely slept, clutching my hunting knife, jumping at every sound. By day, I followed trails of broken branches, strange footprints, and crushed undergrowth. If something large had passed. Once, I found a tuft of coarse gray hair caught on a branch, nothing like any animal fur I'd seen days past, and I felt myself slipping. The forest, once beautiful and inviting, now seemed menacing. The trees loomed, their branches like grasping fingers. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, even in daylight. But still, I stayed. The need to understand, to document, had become an obsession. It all came to a head on what should have been my last night. I planned to hike out in the morning, assignment finished, sanity hanging by a thread. I set cameras for one final night of observation, hoping for that one clear shot to prove I wasn't crazy. I must have dozed, because I woke suddenly in pitch blackness inside my tent. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, chirping insects had vanished. Outside, something moved. Soft, unmistakable footsteps circling, sniffing. I lay paralyzed with terror as it completed its circuit. Then, slowly, I saw the zipper of my tent begin to move inch by agonizing inch. The opening widened. I wanted to scream, to ruin anything, but my body wouldn't respond. Eyes wide in the dark, I watched a long, pale hand with too many joints slip through the opening. The hand paused, sensing my fear. Then deliberately, it reached toward my camera, lying next to my sleeping bag. Instinct finally broke through my paralysis. I lunged, snatching the camera away. Kicked out, tearing the tent fabric. Tumbled out into the night. I ran blindly, clutching the camera to my chest, crashing through underbrush, stumbling over roots, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, I heard it pursuing, not running, but moving with terrible swiftness, flowing through the forest like smoke. I don't know how far I ran. My lungs burned, legs ached, but terror drove me onward. Finally, mercifully, I saw lights ahead, the ranger station at the trailhead, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. I burst out of the trees, gasping and sobbing. The startled ranger took one look at my wild eyes and torn clothes, then ushered me inside, locking the door behind us. The rest of the night is a blur. I remember telling my story, the ranger's skeptical look turning to concern as he saw the raw fear in my eyes. Police arriving, taking my statement. When they asked to see my camera, I turned it on with shaking hands. But where there should have been dozens of photos of that otherworldly being, there was nothing. Just trees, shadows, normal forest scenes. Even the photos from that final night, the ones I was sure I'd taken, of the hand reaching in, were gone. In the harsh fluorescent light of the ranger station, surrounded by civilization, my experience began to feel like a bad dream. Asterisk, had I imagined it all? Had 2 weeks alone in the deep woods driven me mad? Then, in the very last photo on the camera, barely visible in the background, was a figure, tall and thin, half hidden behind a tree. And though the image was blurry, I swear it was smiling. I've never gone back to those woods. I've never told the full story to anyone but you. My editor got a watered-down version about being spooked by wildlife. The photos I submitted, carefully curated to show only the forest's natural beauty. But sometimes, on dark nights, when the wind whispers through the trees outside my window, I think about what's out there in the deep woods, the things lurking just beyond the reach of our cameras and understanding. And I wonder, with a chill that cuts to the bone, if it's still out there watching, waiting. So if you're ever in the wilderness, setting up your camera for that perfect shot of untouched nature, pay attention to the shadows between the trees. And if you see something moving there, something that doesn't quite fit, don't try to photograph it. Just run, and don't look back. Look back? No, because some things in this world aren't meant to be captured on film. Once they notice you noticing them, they never forget. They never stop watching, and sooner or later they come for you. The first time I saw her, I thought I was looking in a mirror. Same shoulder length, brown hair, same green eyes. Even the tiny scar above my left eyebrow when I got as a kid. But this was no reflection. It was a living, breathing woman who could have been my twin. Our eyes met across the crowded dining room. She smiled and waved. A chill ran down my spine. I knew then with sickening certainty that my relaxing Caribbean cruise had just veered into uncharted waters. My name's Sarah Mitchell. Until that moment, I'd been enjoying a much-needed vacation aboard the majestic Dreamer luxury cruise slicing through turquoise Caribbean waters. I'm 32, a software engineer from Seattle. This was my first real break in years. 10 days of sun, relaxation, and maybe, if I was lucky, a little romance. The first few days were perfect. Lounging by the pool, indulging in far too many fruity cocktails, and flirting with a handsome guy named Mike, who was traveling with friends. But everything changed on the fourth night captain's dinner. I dressed up in a new blue dress I'd bought just for the cruise. Walking into the grand dining room, I caught my reflection in a large, ornate mirror. I paused to fix my hair. That's when I saw her at first. I thought it was a trick of angles, my reflection from a different spot. Then, I turned to look directly. She was real, a person who looked exactly like me down to the smallest detail. Our eyes locked. For a moment, the bustling dining room faded away. She smiled and waved, like we were old friends. I was rooted to the spot, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real, had to be a prank, or a vivid hallucination. A waiter bumped into me, breaking the spell. When I looked back, she was gone, lost in the sea of passengers heading to their tables. Through dinner, I couldn't focus. My eyes scanned the room, searching for my doppelganger. I saw her once across the room, seated at a table. But when I blinked, she vanished again. Sarah, are you okay? Mike's voice snapped me back. You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a laugh. Just tired. Must be the sun. But unease settled in my gut. Who was she? Why did she look exactly like me? The next morning, I vowed to find her. I spent hours wandering the ship, checking every lounge, restaurant, and deck. No sign. Late afternoon, I caught a glimpse again turning a corner at the hallway's end. I broke into a run. But when I rounded the corner, the corridor was empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, my face, smiling at me from across the dining room. Around 2 a.m., I gave up and took a walk to clear my head. The ship was eerily quiet as I wandered the deserted corridors. On an upper deck, leaning on the railing, staring at the moonlit ocean, I heard footsteps behind me, soft but distinct. I turned expecting to see her, but it was Mike. Surprised to see me, double quotes, Sarah, what are you doing up so late? I hesitated, then took a chance. Mike, this is going to sound crazy, but have you seen anyone who looks exactly like me? He frowned, confused. What do you mean? I told him everything about the doppelganger, chasing her through the ship. Concern grew in his eyes. Sarah, he said gently, maybe you should talk to the ship's doctor. Stress can do weird things to your mind. I'm not crazy, I snapped, then felt guilty for hurting him. I know what I saw. She's real. Asterisk, he nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. Okay, he said, let's investigate tomorrow. If someone looks that much like you, others must have noticed too, I agreed, grateful for his support even. If he thought I was losing it. We planned to meet for breakfast. I went back to my cabin, feeling slightly better that night. I dreamed of endless corridors lined with mirrors, each showing a slightly different version of myself. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The next days blurred into paranoia and fruitless searching. Mike and I questioned passengers, checked lists, even bribed a junior crew member for security footage, but no sign of her. Other passengers started giving me strange looks. I overheard whispers, saw people pointing and talking in low voices. More than once, someone insisted they'd seen me somewhere else on the ship. Mike stayed by my side, but I could tell his patience was wearing thin. Maybe it's just someone who looks like you, he suggested one afternoon by the pool. Now you're seeing what you expect to see. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew something strange was happening. It all came to a head on the 8th night. Walking back to my cabin after a late movie, I saw her again, standing at the end of the corridor, watching me, determined not to lose her. I ran toward her. "Wait, who are you? Why do you look like me?" I called out. She turned and fled. I chased her through twisting corridors upstairs, down hallways, through lounges and restaurants. It was like a maze more than once. I found myself in parts of the ship I'd never seen before. Finally, I cornered her in a dead-end hallway. She stood with her back to me, shoulders heaving as if she'd been running too. "Please," I gasped, out of breath, "just tell me who you are." Slowly, she turned to face me, and the world tilted sideways. Her face was mine but wrong somehow, proportions slightly off, eyes too large, smile too wide. Her features rippled and shifted like a reflection in disturbed water. "Who am I?" she said, her voice a distorted version of my own. "I'm you, Sarah, or rather, who you could be, who you might become." She stepped closer. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. What are you?" Her smile widened impossibly wide. "I'm a possibility, a potential future. This ship exists where realities intersect, where different versions of ourselves can meet." My mind reeled, trying to understand. "But why? Show yourself to me." She laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "To give you a choice. You can go back to your life, your safe, predictable existence, or you can embrace the unknown, become something more." As she spoke, the hallway behind her shimmered and shifted like a heat haze. Beyond it, I glimpsed other places, other realities. She held out her hand. "Come with me, Sarah. See what you could become." For a moment, I was tempted. The promise of adventure, the unknown pulling at me. But then I thought of my life back home, my friends, my family. Mike Dash, probably worried sick. I shook my head. No, this is my reality, my life, and I choose it. Her face twisted in anger, becoming less human by the second. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Before I could react, she lunged. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact, but it never came. Instead, I felt a rush of wind, a sensation of falling, then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my cabin. Sunlight streamed through the porthole. The sounds of passengers filtered in from the hallway. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream. Then I noticed something on my bedside table, small silver pendant, shaped like a key. Something I'd never seen before, but strangely familiar. I picked it up. As I did, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. For a second, I could have sworn my reflection smiled, with a mouth a little too wide. The rest of the cruise passed uneventfully. I never saw my doppelganger again. Eventually, I convinced myself the stress and sun had played tricks on my mind. Mike and I grew closer, and by the end of the trip, I tried to leave the nightmare behind. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what if the choice isn't over? What if she's still out there waiting, watching and one day she'll come for me again. By the time we docked, Mike and I were already planning to see each other again back in the real world. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring at that silver key, wondering about the roads not taken, other versions of myself, and alternate realities. I can't help but think that somewhere out there, on a ship sailing through the spaces between worlds, another Sarah made a very different choice. So, if you ever find yourself on a cruise and catch sight of someone who looks exactly like you, remember my story and think carefully about the choices you make, because sometimes our doubles are more than just reflections. Sometimes they are glimpses of who we might become, whether for better or for worse. The words were whispered with a chilling urgency, raw fear cutting through the diner's stale air. "Whatever you do, don't be here at midnight." The weathered trucker who said it was already walking away, leaving me frozen in my seat, my half-eaten burger growing cold. Glancing at my watch, I saw it was 11:37 p.m. Looking around the diner, I noticed tense faces and furtive glances. I realized with a creeping dread that I'd stumbled into something far darker than a simple late-night pit stop. My name is Jack. Until that moment, I'd been on a routine cross-country drive from New York to Los Angeles. I'm a freelance photographer, hauling sensitive equipment that couldn't be trusted to shipping companies. The pay was good, and I figured the road trip might give me some interesting shots along the way. After nearly 18 hours behind the wheel, fueled by gas station coffee and stubborn determination, I spotted Mel's Diner, a neon beacon in the Nevada desert's dark. Hungry and exhausted, I pulled in. The diner looked like a postcard from the 1950s chrome. Red vinyl booths, a jukebox playing classic rock and roll, but something felt off the moment. I stepped inside. The place was surprisingly crowded for the hour, but the atmosphere was electric tense, uneasy. Sliding into a booth, I ordered a cheeseburger and coffee from a waitress whose smile was too forced to be genuine. Everyone seemed on edge. Conversations whispered, and eyes kept flicking toward the large clock above the counter. When my food arrived, I tried to make small talk. "Busy night?" I asked. She nodded, eyes darting nervously to the clock. "It usually is around this time," I pressed. "Late night traffic." She hesitated, then leaned in. "Listen, honey, eat fast and get back on the road. You don't want to be here too long." Before I could ask why, she vanished into the crowd. Then the trucker at the counter turned and whispered, "Whatever you do, don't be here at midnight." Patrons began leaving hurriedly, practically running to their cars. Confused, I asked the waitress what was going on. She glanced nervously at the clock. 11:45 p.m., lowering her voice. She said, "I shouldn't tell you this, but bad things happen here at midnight. Nobody knows why. Some say this diner sits on a weak spot between worlds. All I know is you don't want to be here when the clock strikes 12. I laughed, though the sound was hollow, even to me. "Come on, haunted, or what?" Her expression stayed deadly serious. "Worse. Now please, finish your meal and go." I wanted to believe it was a local prank to scare tourists, but the fear in her eyes and the heavy tension in the air felt all too real. I gulped down my coffee, threw money on the table, and stood to leave. But then I noticed the door was gone. Where the entrance should have been was now a solid wall, covered in the same tacky wallpaper as the rest of the diner. Blinking hard, I convinced myself I was just tired, but when I opened my eyes, the wall was still there. A voice whispered, "It's starting." Turning, I saw about a dozen remaining patrons huddled in the center of the diner, the waitress clutching a coffee pot like a weapon. "What's starting? What's going on?" I asked, panic rising. An old man with a face like weathered leather spoke up. "It's midnight, son, or we'll be in about 2 minutes. That's when they come." "Who comes? What are you talking about?" Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered. The jukebox, which had been playing Great Balls of Fire, switched to a slow, discordant melody I didn't recognize. The temperature dropped sharply. "Circle up," the old man shouted. "Remember, don't look directly at them. And whatever you do, don't let them touch you." The group formed a tight circle facing outward. Without thinking, I joined them, pressing my back against strangers. The waitress pressed something into my hand, a salt shaker. "Salt and iron," she muttered. "The only things that slow them down." I wanted to laugh, call this insanity, but my words died as I saw shapes moving outside, darker than the night itself, flowing like smoke, but with terrible purpose. They pressed against the frosted windows, which were inexplicably icing over, despite the desert heat. As the clock struck midnight, the real horror began. The shadows coalesced into vague humanoid forms, terrifying because they were almost recognizable. They oozed through cracks around the windows, seeping into the diner like poisonous gas. Someone whimpered. I felt a hand squeeze mine tightly. The old man began chanting in a language I didn't understand. Others joined, their voices trembling but growing stronger. The shadow creatures circled us, their movements jerky and unnatural, limbs stretched too long, faces twisted and shifting like smoke. The air thickened with the stench of ozone and decay. One creature reached toward us. Instinctively, I flung the salt shaker at it. It recoiled with a hiss like radio static, its form dissipating for a moment, before reforming. Time warped minutes, or hours passed, I couldn't tell. My arm ached from holding out salt, my throat raw from chanting words I didn't know. Just when I thought I couldn't hold on any longer, something changed. The old man's chanting crescendoed, the air rippled, the shadow figures began retreating, becoming less distinct. They flowed back out the windows, which shattered in a spray of glass. A fierce wind whipped through the diner, carrying away the last wisps of creatures and the smell of decay. And just as suddenly as it began, it was over. We stood in stunned silence, ragged breaths and broken glass underfoot. Slowly, the circle broke apart. I saw tears on some faces, blank shock on others. The waitress was the first to speak. "Everyone okay? Anyone touched?" A murmur of no. No one appeared physically hurt, at least not visibly. It was as if a spell had been broken. The diner burst back to life, sweeping glass, righting overturned chairs, restoring normalcy. The old man approached me, eyes kind but tired. "First time, huh? You did good. What were those things? Why here? Why midnight?" I finally asked. He shook his head. "I wish I could tell you. I've been coming here every night for 30 years, trying to figure it out. All I know is they're getting stronger, and if we weren't here to hold them back." He trailed off, his meaning clear, as dawn painted the desert in pink and gold. The diner door reappeared. People left, nodding at each other with the camaraderie of soldiers who'd survived a battle. My legs shaky, mind spinning, I made my way to my car. Just as I was about to drive off, the waitress ran out and pressed a piece of paper into my hand. "If you're ever passing through again," she said quietly, "and want to help, this is where we'll be." I looked down. The paper was a schedule, a roster of guardians keeping watch against the darkness. As I pulled back onto the highway, the night's events felt like a dream, but the salt shaker on my passenger seat and the paper in my hand were proof. I don't know if I'll ever return to that diner. Part of me hopes never to see it again, but another part, one I'm still coming to terms with, knows I will. Because now that I've seen what lurks between moments, how can I not stand against it? So if you're ever driving through the Nevada desert late at night and see a diner glowing like a beacon in the darkness, think carefully before you stop. And if you do, keep a close eye on the clock, because when midnight strikes, you might find yourself facing horrors beyond imagination, or standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers. The last line of defense against the encroaching dark. Whatever you do, don't be there at midnight, unless, of course, you choose to be.